Welcome everybody. Today I'm going to break down a video about a psychologist who says it's not narcissism you're dealing with, you are dealing with someone who has ADHD. And to me, it's pretty careless that a psychologist goes on to say some of this stuff because she's acting like she is so sure about something that she can't possibly be sure about because in each individual situation, it can be a different story. What is true in one circumstance may not be true in another circumstance, etc. But we're going to break that all down because to me, not cool and a little bit careless as well. But before I get into that, I do have a new course available. It's my Getting Clarity course, my course for clarity to help people clear up the confusion if they are extremely confused in a toxic relationship. Because if people are in a toxic relationship, that is the number one thing I hear most of them feel. They are confused. And I wanted to help people clear up that confusion. So I have a brief course. It's not very long. You're going to get in 25 minutes a lot of clarity, and hopefully you'll begin to understand a little bit more about your situation. It's also at a very affordable price point. It's not as much as my coaching sessions, and it's for the people that maybe don't have too much money, but they still want some help. They still want to get some clarity. The course is made for people like that. But anyone could definitely benefit from this. My Stand Store link is going to be in the description of this video. But let's jump in here to this video here that I have an issue with, and let me know in the comments below what you think of this. Am I crazy that I think this is out of line? Or maybe you agree with her, but let's find out.
They do not have narcissism. They have ADHD. I'm a psychologist, and all of you out here who are diagnosing your partners or other people with narcissistic personality disorder, it's way, way, way more likely that they have ADHD or a subclinical form of ADHD, and I'm going to explain why.
And first of all, how do you know if it's way, way, way more likely? That's a big thing I would want to know right there. But let's listen to some more.
So, narcissism is 1% of the population. ADHD
1%? That is a very low estimate of the population. Estimates are as high as 6%, if not more. And let's break that down for a minute. 6% of the population of over 300 million people, that's almost 20 million people there impacted that actually have the condition. And if each one of those people impacts 5 people throughout their lives, and that's a very conservative estimate, that's 100 million people impacted. When I interviewed Chelsea Brooke Cole, she's the author of If Only I'd Known, she goes over that stat in her book. And I think she's absolutely right that a lot of people are impacted by this, hundreds of millions. And 5 people that each person impacts, that's even a low estimate. It could even be as high as 20 to 50 a person as well. So I don't like this framing from the start.
is 4.4% of the adult population, much more likely in males than in females. Variable attention stimulus trait, which is thought to be like a subclinical form of ADHD in which people have some of the traits of.
And even if ADHD is 4.4%, it is absolutely possible that narcissism is more than 4.4% of the population.
ADHD is 15 to 20% of the population and rising every year. So if we consider that NPD is 1%, ADHD is almost 5%, and VAST, variable attention stimulus trait, is up to 20% in the population, the more likely scenario here is that your partner has VAST. And what it can look scary close to NPD in certain circumstances. And it often looks very similar to narcissism in conflict. And the reason for this is because of rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
And I've gone over rejection sensitivity dysphoria. There's a lot of people that I would consider narcissistic. They love to blame their rejection sensitivity dysphoria because what do narcissistic people do? They externalize the blame. And it's even better if they can externalize the blame to a condition like rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It is a great scapegoat for them, And as I always say, though, if someone can't take accountability for their actions, they can't admit when they're wrong, and they're going to blame something like this, regardless of that person's label, that is absolutely going to be a problem. Anyone who wants to blame rejection sensitivity dysphoria without also then working on the issue, it's not acceptable. And it's like we say, trauma is not an excuse for poor behavior. Neither would ADHD be an excuse for poor behavior. Neither would CPTSD. Neither would be on the spectrum or bipolar. Fill in the blank. It's an immature thing to do, to blame a condition like that. Now, does that mean there are no issues with those conditions? Do they not struggle? No, it doesn't mean that. They can absolutely struggle, but just because someone struggles doesn't mean it's a permission to blame shift. We all got to take responsibility for whatever our issues are, because none of us chose whatever our issues are, right? No one chose to have ADHD. No one chose to have CPTSD. No one chose even to have narcissism. But that's not the point. The point is, we got dealt the hand we were dealt. What do we do about it now? That's the point. And the only mature way to go is to try to play that hand the best we absolutely can. Because what other choice do we have for that matter? What are we going to do? Just play the victim and be woe's me? Well, the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect doesn't choose to do that. I've had my fair share of issues, neurodivergence, addiction, anxiety, depression, but yeah, it has caused struggles, absolutely. But I try to see it as, well, they happened for me, not to me. And it does help me that I do this now. It's given me a purpose. It means that I can see the meaning behind some of that. It's like, okay, now that I'm doing what I'm doing, I can see the silver lining a little bit easier. And granted, for people who are not doing something similar to me, I get it. It's going to be a little more difficult to see the silver lining, but perhaps the silver lining will just be difficult for you, or different for you. We're all going to be on our own journey here.
This is something that happens to individuals with ADHD and with VAST because of the way that their neurology is. So because the dopaminergic centers of their mind and because of how their amygdala works, they are just extremely sensitive to criticism. They're super sensitive to it. And so if you go up to them and you say, honey, you did this and that, and you did this and this, and I didn't like it, and I need you to stop, they can react just like a narcissist. They can get highly critical back to you. They can get super defensive. They can get very upset. They can get angry. And they can have a very difficult time regulating their emotions.
And that's one thing there too, where there's a difference between someone who is going to be a little more neurotic and blame themselves when they have an issue versus someone who is more character disordered. Someone who is more character disordered, they're going to do what she just said. They're going to lash out, get extremely defensive, and then be aggressive in a toxic and sometimes even abusive way. That is a big difference. And regardless of that person's label, if someone with ADHD is doing that, being extremely toxic and abusive, that's a problem. And I don't even care what you call it at that point. A problem is a problem. And that's the other thing here. What she's trying to do here, it sounds like, is run image management for people with ADHD. She may even be a little narcissistic herself, and that's probably why she's making this video, but she's running defense for what I would consider narcissistic people. And she's kind of smearing even ADHD here a little bit as well, because I think she's attributing things to it that I don't necessarily think are the most accurate. And granted, who am I to be criticizing? I'm not a licensed professional. She is, but it's kind of troubling to me that a licensed professional is talking the way she's talking in this video.
When this happens. And that does not mean that they have narcissism. It means that they have ADHD or subclinical ADHD, and that's because they cannot regulate the extreme dysphoria, which means just like epic pain that comes from criticism. When it comes to ADHD, we know that their emotions, their negative emotions in particular, are stronger and last longer and are way more difficult to regulate. So when you communicate with them like you would in, say, like a normal relationship, and you think like, oh, I'm gonna, bring something to my partner that I didn't like, and we're gonna talk it out and we're gonna resolve it and it's going to be great. It doesn't work like that with people with ADHD or the subclinical form of ADHD. They react very poorly to this. And that's because of the rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
And honestly, it sounds a lot like she's talking about emotional immaturity here. There are people that have ADHD. They have learned how to take a step back and respond rather than react. It's like, okay, just because someone's sensitive to criticism doesn't give them an excuse to be creating more problems and not being good at collaboration in their relationships and lashing out at others. That's not how it works. Narcissistic people do this because they are hypersensitive to criticism and perceived criticism. This is why they'll perceive disagreements as attacks. Someone who tells them no, or someone who tries to communicate a boundary with them, that'll be the end of the world to narcissistic people. And she's trying to make it sound like, oh, well, ADHD people might be exactly the same. And it's like, will they be? Even the person who has ADHD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, even they can learn how to take a step back and respond rather than react. And even if they try to blame rejection sensitivity dysphoria, that's not a mature thing to do. That's not them taking a step back and learning how to respond rather than react. So I don't like the framing of this at all.
And I think that's what a lot of people on this platform are experiencing with their partners or significant others that they think have NPD. They're seeing this like super rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't make any headway with this individual because they get so defensive and they essentially freak out every time I bring anything to them. And that's because individuals with ADHD are so sensitive to criticism, and you need to speak to them in a different way. So the best way to
And I don't like this part either, because if that's how someone is who has ADHD, why would you be in a relationship with that person, regardless of that person's label? Again, it sounds a lot more like she's talking about someone who is character disordered here, and then it's almost like she's trying to give them this pass. And it's like, oh no, you actually have to just talk to them differently. Never mind the fact they're lashing out at you and being extremely defensive. And let's think about that too. What kinds of behaviors will a narcissistic person do? They're going to blame shift. They might invalidate you. They might flip the script, use tactics like Darvo, deny, accuse, reverse victim, and offender. They'll distort and twist what you say. All of those things are aggressive tactics, aggressive, toxic, and abusive tactics. And if someone with ADHD is doing those things, honestly, it could maybe at the best be a comorbid ADHD and narcissist, but either way, that's a problem. And if you ever see people acting like that and then they try to say they have ADHD, that's a no bueno. No bueno. Get out of there, Jack. Don't try to do what she's about to say here. No, I just have to speak to them differently and blah, blah, blah. It's like, nah, that person doesn't seem like they have the emotional maturity anyway at that point. And if you have to do that, that doesn't sound like someone who's going to be a good teammate for you and someone that you're going to be able to build a strong foundation with.
do this is to essentially try to phrase everything almost like a compliment, because they actually experience the opposite as well. So because they're so sensitive to rejection, they're actually super hypersensitive to compliments as well.
And honestly, that's exactly like a narcissist. A narcissist can be sensitive to compliments because they like it when people confirm to them their sense of superiority and grandiosity. And that is absolutely how you can manipulate a narcissist. It's some of our politicians, we see them, right? If you give them praise, they have a really difficult time calling you out. If you give them praise, they want to have your back and be loyal to you. And it's because that admiration, they're getting the admiration and they feel superior. And whenever people confirm that to them, they're like that person. But to make this a part of ADHD too, I don't know. It sounds like she's twisting and distorting even the ADHD definition here, but let's go on.
So compliments like feel like way better to them than the average person. So the way that we speak to individuals that have ADHD symptoms needs to really change. And that's why we're all getting stuck. And that's why I think so many people are following so much of this like narcissism content because they feel stuck. They're like, why can't I make any headway with my partner? And it's because we just can't criticize them. Like we can't do it. Like we need to stop approaching these conflicts or these conversations from a place of criticism. And the thing is that what doesn't sound like criticism to you will sound like criticism to someone that has ADHD symptoms. So
And if someone is that difficult to work with and problem solve with and try to solve conflicts with, that is just not going to be someone you're going to have a healthy relationship 99 times out of 100. You got to have a strong foundation. And what kinds of people have a strong foundation? The people that trust one another, feel comfortable being themselves with one another. They're able to have those difficult conversations. But if someone does some of the things that she's talking about in this video, whether it's narcissism or ADHD, it's a problem either way. And I would be really hesitant trying to jump and tiptoe around that other person's feelings. It's like, no, if you have to walk on eggshells around this other person because you're afraid they're going to lash out at you and be really defensive and they could perceive something as criticism, even if it's not the best. Because again, what do narcissistic people do? They will perceive any sort of criticism as an attack, any sort of disagreement as an attack, and it can be real or perceived. And that's kind of what she's talking about here, perceived criticism. But again, that's a lot more like narcissism to me.
If you think your partner's a narcissist, they probably aren't. They probably have subclinical ADHD.
And that generalization right there, that's outrageous that a psychologist is going to be this general with this. It's like, no, you're not allowed to. You don't know someone's situation and you're going to make a massive generalization like that. Even I will say each situation needs to be taken individually. That's it. Someone can come to me with a situation. Maybe I will think that person is more ADHD. It's not that I'm diagnosing them, but I'm open to the possibility that before I know about a situation, I'm not going to generalize about what that situation could possibly be because I have no idea about that specific situation. And that's why I dislike any of the generalizations, honestly, about what something could or couldn't be. Each individual situation needs to be taken individually. And it also reminds me about how people will think if I talk about a behavior a narcissist does, well, then all of a sudden, everyone who does that behavior is also a narcissist. And that's not true either. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that that behavior is good, regardless of that person's label, but it doesn't mean that everyone who does that behavior is a narcissist.
And it's on the rise and we're all becoming more ADHD. And I really hope this helps people. Please comment below if you'd like to have me make some videos about tips of how to speak to someone that has ADHD symptoms, because speaking to someone with more of like a neurodiversity isn't the same as speaking to someone with the kind of neurotypical mind. So we can speak to people in a way that makes sense to them. And that's what the biggest takeaway I hope is for this video, is that we need to learn to speak to individuals who are not neurotypical in a way that makes sense to them if we want to be in a relationship with them or if we want to make progress.
All right. So that's the end of that. Let's see what some of these comments have to say here before I give you the rest of my thoughts. I have had ADHD my whole life. I'm also an empath. My ADHD has only stopped me from learning certain subjects in school. Yeah, exactly my point. Exactly my point. She's talking more about like character disorder stuff if I had to guess. She seems to be making excuses. Yep, I would absolutely agree with that. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. She's exaggerating the definition of ADHD here. I mean, it's not even fair to ADHD people. And granted, is there more ADHD in this day and age? There's probably some because of all of the social media stuff and all of the distractions we have. It's difficult to read a book these days. And granted, though, that's different even than a clinical ADHD diagnosis, right? That's just a little struggle for attention. That is different. That is different than ADHD. Let's see here. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess like my whole thing with it is someone who truly has an issue, regardless of what that issue is, whether it's CPTSD, ADHD, bipolar, autism, addiction, it's up to all of us to work with that. And I think we have to be at a certain baseline before we're healthy enough for a relationship. Like we have to have a good sense of self-love and self-respect, and we got to be in a good place. When we're in a good place and we've done some work on ourselves, then we're able to do some of this stuff in a relationship and be emotionally mature. But if you are the way she is saying in a relationship, you're probably not in the best spot for a relationship. And it sounds like there's more work that needs to be done before you're ready to be a mature and healthy partner. And again, just because you might have an issue with something doesn't mean it's your fault that you have that issue. Like we didn't choose the cards we've been dealt. But once we have the cards, we got to try to play them. And if someone's not in a good spot, it won't really be fair to the other person that's going to be like that. It's like, no, if you're going to be the person in the relationship that any real or perceived criticism, you're going to lash out and get really defensive over every little thing. That doesn't sound too good. What's the relationship between ADD and depression? You know, that's a good question. I can't say I know for sure. I would say there's two versions of that, right? There's when someone's depressed and ADHD that's comorbid. And then there's probably ADD that, because of the consequences of the ADD, can make someone more depressed. I could see that too. And because here's the other thing. There is a difference between situational depression and clinical depression. Like those are two different things. And I think one of the cues of a clinical depression is it's like not situational. It's always there. And whether someone medicates it with medicine, or maybe they find other things, maybe like even just changing up their sleep, diet, and exercise can have a really good benefit. But if it's really clinical depression or bipolar, sometimes that doesn't even matter. It's still going to be a struggle. Magic Mike, my man, says, it seems ADHD, like a lot of self-diagnosis, though, can be accurate. Knowing ourselves can be an excuse for lack of impulse control and a cross-stream with CPTSD. I do agree that we are the expert on ourselves, and everyone... We've lived with ourselves, right? More so than any psychiatrist that sees us for a 2-hour intake and they try to diagnose our whole lives in 2 hours. They don't know. They only know what we say to them. And honestly, for a psychiatrist to get the best picture, they would probably need to talk to your friends, family, and partners to get the full picture, because especially when it comes to character disordered people and narcissistic people, what do? They lie. They lie because it's second nature to them to lie. So they'll go to a psychiatrist, and if they lie, that psychiatrist is not going to be able to accurately help them because they're not working with the right information. It's impossible to help somebody if you're not working with the facts, if you're not working with what's really going on. Oh, symptom overlap. Yeah, oh, definitely. That's correct. CPTSD can definitely symptom overlap with ADHD. My friend Kelly, who I call P-Dubs, I've interviewed her a couple times. She has both of those. So maybe that's something that I'm going to have her on again soon. And we're going to talk about some dating stuff. And I'll go over that with her too. Because she knows that more than me. That's her wheelhouse. Her wheelhouse is attachment styles, CPTSD, ADHD, That's her wheelhouse. The healing trauma stuff with EMDR. That's her nook. I'm not as good at that stuff. I don't know as much about them. I'm more about the radical self-respect, narcissism, dating, relationship stuff, but that's just me. Depression comes on out of nowhere. Depression can come out of nowhere, I think, for sure. But I also think it's, well, what do you think? Do you think it can be something that someone has like a gene for it, and then when puberty comes around or something, or maybe even before that, it's just there. It's just there, and so that's what happens. It's there. I don't know. But I definitely agree that it can come in waves, and it can come out of nowhere. And I think, like, I don't know, do you take medicine for ADHD, or do you do natural things for ADHD, or what? Like, me personally, I'm a big fan of supplementation. And yeah, Dr. Salerno, right? We would talk about that. I mean, I think there's a lot of nature in all of this, and that's not to say the environment doesn't play a part. The environment definitely plays a part. It's just a matter of how much. How much does it play a part, and which variables in the environment play a part? And speaking of Dr. Salerno, I'm reading his new book now, Trauma Cognitive Dissonance. If you haven't seen that, he has a new book. Check that out. When I'm done reading it, I'm going to have him back on the show too, so we can go over the content of that book. That should be pretty interesting. I'm looking to have, I guess we'll do some more announcements here too. Dr. George Simon, author of In Sheep's Clothing and Character Disturbance. Sometime in mid-February, I think I'm going to have him on. I reached out to HG Tudor again because it's been over a year since I've spoken to him. I'm waiting to hear back from him again. He told me to give him some dates, and I did, but I haven't heard back from him yet. But we're going to have him on again as well. I'm going to ask him what he thinks about the genetic component, like where he is with that. I bet you he's on Dr. Salerno's page if I had to guess. I bet you, yeah, HG would be more of a genetic guy if I had to guess. But I don't know. It's a fascinating discussion to me, the nature nurture discussion, and yeah, I think sometimes some of it depends on the issue, but genes play a big part. To me, genes play a big part in a lot of this stuff. And supplementation, I haven't spoken about supplements for a while, but I got a pretty big supplement routine because I've had a lot of issues I've had to like work on. You know, I've had a neurodivergence, severe anxiety, and there's just like the brain wasn't working right. I wasn't working at full capacity. And now I take these supplements, and it's like I'm able to reach my full potential now, where before I just wasn't. Let's see. I don't take anything. I learned to change on my own. It's been very effective in my life. Eat healthy, work out, and get enough sleep. And honestly, those three, that's the first line of defense for everything, honestly. Whether it's depression, anxiety, addiction issues, ADHD, and granted, it can be tough for people just to even get those three down. I don't want to minimize that, but it absolutely is humongous. Sleep is another big one that people just don't pay as much attention to. But think of it like this. If you live 60 years and you sleep 8 hours a night, you've been asleep for 20 years. 20 years of sleep. But it's super important to me. If I don't get a good night's sleep, it's like my battery is not charged properly. And when my battery is not charged properly, I'm just not myself. Also have a job that you enjoy for the most part. Absolutely. I mean, our purpose and what we do, and besides sleep, work is where we spend the majority of the rest of our lives, honestly. So if we're at a place that we're miserable the majority of the time, not going to be good for our mental health. And it's like the psychiatrists that say, before you diagnose yourself with depression, first make sure you're just not surrounded by assholes. Fair enough, right? Yep, see? You said it, Magic Mike. Purging toxic people. Absolutely right. That's what it's all about. When we protect our peace, we'll really know what we're dealing with, because a lot of times we're just around jerks. If we're around jerks who are consistently being antagonistic, belittling, condescending, gaslighting, invalidating, etc., yeah, they're very unpleasant to be around. Very unpleasant. And we know, before we're familiar with that kind of thing, we don't know that we're dealing with that. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You just realize, oh, I don't feel very good. You don't even think, oh, it's this other person here that's really being abusive or toxic, and that's impacting my mood. But when I spoke to Meredith Miller, she said a few things that always have stood out to me. One of them was, if you don't find yourself being comfortable with somebody on a consistent basis, or you don't feel comfortable being yourself around them, there's probably a very good reason for that. And the reason why that framing always stood out to me was, when I was growing up, I was always told, it's my fault. If you're having an issue, it's all your fault, and there's something wrong with how you're feeling. So for her to say that, oh, if you don't feel comfortable being yourself around someone, there's probably a good reason. I was like, oh my God, that's so validating to hear that wow, there's a good reason why I have this uncomfortable feeling. But that was the beginning of me seeing things in a much different light. So I'm super appreciative to Meredith. I'm going to try to have Meredith back on the program again here too. Hopefully you enjoyed my interview with her the first time around. Yeah, definitely let me know who you would like to see me talk to again of the people that I've already spoken to, or who you would like to see me talk to for the first time, because I'm definitely open to talking to new people as well. And to me, honestly, besides these live streams here, because this is fun for me, doing a back and forth, the interviews are also fun. I think the shorts, it's a lot of value in a short amount of time. Doesn't necessarily help the business portion of what I do, but I do enjoy doing them. I like them, I enjoy doing them, and I put them here and all of the rest of the social media platforms too. So TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. And again, for the people who missed it when I said it before, I do have a course for clarity out now. And it's designed to be a very affordable course. It's for the people that might not be able to afford a coaching session with me. But I want to be able to help them too. Get some clarity, clear up their confusion. And it's 25 minutes. It's 25 minutes long, but it breaks down a lot of the issues that I see people have in the beginning. It's like, okay, what are you dealing with? Why are you feeling confused? Why do you feel difficult to love? Why does it feel like you have to walk on eggshells? Those are the things I go over. And then I go over the cycle of abuse, because that's the other big one. And the cycle of abuse, that can happen in family relationships, friendships, workplace relationships, cults, and of course, romantic relationships too. I think most people default to romantic relationships. They think, yep, cycle of abuse, romantic relationships. But no, not just romantic relationships. It's also family, in the workplace. Cults will do that to love bomb. I interviewed that woman, Naomi. She was sharing her experience about the cult, and she said they were trained to love bomb new members to get them in the door. Cult in Connecticut is her podcast, by the way. Sort of like H.G. Tudor. It would be interesting to see you talk to a narcissist that isn't on the road to change. Now, there's two different versions of those, right? There's the kind that doesn't know they're a narcissist, but they are one. That would be interesting in its own way. And then there's people like H.G. Tudor who know they are, but just aren't on the path to change. But I will say this about it. When someone's like H.G. Tudor, it's refreshing, at least, to have them be real. Like they're a real person. They're like, oh, I'm this person, and I own it. And to me, I always have less of a problem with that. The person who stabs you in the front, as opposed to the person who tries to pretend to be a better person than they actually are. I've never liked that. Never have I liked that. And I think most people don't like that, for that matter. Most people want the person who's going to be real. So when HG comes in like, yep, I'm the narcissistic psychopath, and I do this, this, and this, just the fact that he owns it is refreshing and disarming to me. It's like, I know what I'm dealing with here. But it's the person who is a wolf in sheep's clothing, the person who tries to pretend and then stabs you in the back. That's the person you got to watch out for. It's like the old scorpion and a frog thing. Yeah, I agree. SW. I think both would be. Because, I mean, granted, I see people that, between all of the social medias, I see people who definitely use the tactics in the comment sections. I don't know if they're really a narcissist or not. I only know how I see them behave. But they absolutely behave the way I would think a narcissist would. And that would be interesting. The religious covert, that's tricky. I mean, religion is a good cover for the narcissistic types, right? Because they can twist it and distort it into all of the controlling elements. So they love that. It's like a fish to water, religion and narcissism, because it's the control. That's what that's all about. But all right, it's 11 o'clock here now where I am. We could see the difference in the conversation. Oh, between the narcissist that is a narcissist that they know of and the one that doesn't. Well, I'll give you another hint there, SW. I've probably interviewed a couple people that might be narcissistic that they don't claim to be. There are certainly some that I believe narcissism is a spectrum. There's severe versions and less severe versions. I think I've interviewed a couple of the less severe versions in the past. And there's clues. There's clues in there, I think, that you can see it in their behavior. Now, again, I'm not going to diagnose them. I might say narcissistic, but narcissistic is not a diagnosis. It's a descriptive term. It is unethical. It would be unethical to diagnose someone, especially when you're not even a trained professional, licensed clinician. And it'd be unprofessional even for a licensed professional to do that too. They have the code of ethics they have to pay attention to. Yeah. But that's what it would be. There's a couple. There's a couple that I've had some dramas with that, and that's just another clue, right? When it comes to people on the narcissistic spectrum, they are amazing at conflict. They'll create a conflict from scratch. Like, poof, everything will be fine. And then before you know it, you're in boiling water with them. And it can seem, it's usually over trivial things too. It's not even big things. It's trivial. Most of the things are just trivial, but they make mountains out of molehills. And before you know it, you're in that boiling hot water, and it's all your fault, and they're being antagonistic, and it's insane. And, yeah, I mean, because not everyone's going to be a severe version. There's probably more less severe versions than there are severe. But the ones that are severe, to me, they're almost childlike in their ridiculousness. I have a friend, one of the friends I interviewed, her ex is that. And they're just childlike. And it would be amusing if it wasn't so horrific. But when I hear how he treats her, it's like an emotional 4-year-old. Because there's no limit. There's no limit to how petty and ridiculous they'll go. It's just out of control. But I think that's where the seeing them as a malfunctioning robot or an emotional 4-year-old, it does disempower them. And yeah, it is a disorder. Some people were saying that to me too. Well, that's not a malfunctioning robot. It's just a disorder. It's like, well, I see them as a malfunctioning robot for my own sake, to disempower them. Because when I disempower them, they won't hurt me. Or they're not going to be able to hurt me as easily, I should say. So that's just how I choose to see it. But all right. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. But thanks everyone for all the comments here and the back and forth. They were. Magic Mike says, I understand that laws were created overall for these creatures. Yeah, I mean, if you had to guess, what's the percentage of cluster B in jail? Of the 96% of the prison population is dudes, by the way, which is wild. But 96%. And then of what percentage of them is cluster B? It's got to be over 50%. It's got to be. Yep. Some hurt people, some kill people, some ruin people's lives. Yep. And they do it just second nature. It's second nature for them to do it. And they do it intentionally too. They do it intentionally. Like they know. They know what they're doing. And Dr. George Simon would say, it's not that they're not aware, they just don't care. And it's not that they don't see, they just disagree. Of course, my man. Of course. Thank you for your support. And thank you as well, SW, for your support as well. I wonder what SW stands for. But yeah, I mean, the cluster B population in jail's got to be very high. Very, very high. Between antisocial personality disorder, narcissists, borderlines. I wonder how many male histrionics there are. That's the forgotten personality disorder. You don't hear too much about them, the old histrionics. Ah, thank you. I really appreciate you. Without the people following me, I wouldn't be doing it. I wouldn't be doing all this. So I appreciate everyone who, especially people who come on here and talk during the live chat stuff, because that's like the best connection too, honestly, where I can have a back and forth with you, where I can actually speak as opposed to just like answering the comments. And the comments are good too, don't get me wrong. But to me, this is more fun. So, all right, guys, over and out. You'll see me tomorrow on the shorts, but I'm going to try to go live more often now too, because why not? Because why not? This is also more fun for me than doing a longer form video where I'm just giving a monologue. They can be informative, but I prefer these two. So, all right. You guys have a good one.